The warning lights flashed red across every screen in the command center of the Harmony of Spheres. Commander Vrel stared at the displays with his forearms crossed over his chest. His reptilian face showed no emotion, but his tail moved back and forth slowly. That meant he was worried. The anomaly has grown again, Science Officer Quinn announced. Her feathers ruffled as she checked her instruments. The Palaxian scientist had been studying the quantum anomaly for 6 weeks now. Nothing they tried had worked. We now have 72 hours before total collapse. Around the large circular room, scientists from a dozen different species looked at each other. They had tried everything. The Zinthari brought their logical methods. The Palaxians used their mathematical genius. The Mirari contributed their spatial awareness. Even the ancient consortium advisors had offered their wisdom. Nothing stopped the growing tier in space. Lieutenant Commander Jake Murphy stood near the back of the room. The human engineer had been assigned to the coalition vessel 3 months ago. He listened carefully as the alien scientists presented their final reports. Next to him, Dr. Helen Carter took notes on her tablet. The human astrophysicist had arrived 2 weeks earlier to help with the crisis. The anomaly now spans 40,000 kilometers, Quinn continued. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the defeat in it. To stabilize it, we would need to make repairs at 17 different points. All of them would have to be calibrated perfectly. The timing must be exact within microseconds. Commander Vrel spoke in his deep, rumbling voice. How many ships would we need? 17 vessels, each with specialized equipment, Quinn answered. But that is not the real problem. The real problem is coordination. Even with our best computers, we cannot synchronize 17 separate operations across such a distance with the required precision. The probability of success is less than 3%. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. Then we have no choice, Vrel said slowly. We must begin evacuation procedures. There are 3 inhabited planets in this system. We need to move 4.3 million people to safety. That's a lot of people, someone whispered. We have 72 hours, Vrel continued. We will need every available transport ship. Contact all nearby vessels. Tell them this is a priority 1 emergency. The scientists began to leave the room. Their shoulders were slumped. They had failed, and millions of people would lose their homes. Some would probably die during the evacuation. It was a terrible situation. Jake looked at Helen. She looked back at him. They didn't say anything out loud, but they both thought the same thing. There had to be another way. Commander Vrel, Jake said loudly. Wait, the Zinthari commander turned around. His large yellow eyes focused on the human. Yes, Lieutenant Commander Murphy? Jake walked forward. Helen followed him. The other scientists stopped leaving and watched with curiosity. We've got this, Jake said. The room became very quiet. The alien scientists looked confused. Their translators worked on the words, but the meaning didn't make sense to them. Got what? Vrel asked. His tail stopped moving. The anomaly, Helen said. She stepped up next to Jake. We can fix it. Quinn's feathers stood up straight. Did you not hear the briefing? The probability of success is less than 3%. It is impossible. No, it's improbable, Jake corrected. There's a difference. Vrel moved closer to the 2 humans. He studied them carefully. He had worked with humans before. They were strange creatures. They came from a dangerous planet where everything tried to kill them. Weather, earthquakes, animals, diseases. Humans survived anyway. They were tough and stubborn. Explain, Vrel said. Helen pulled up a display on her tablet and projected it into the air. You're right that conventional methods won't work. Your approach requires perfect calculation and perfect execution. But humans have a different way of doing things. What way? Quinn asked. She moved closer to see the display. Coordinated improvisation, Helen said. We work together in real time, adapting to problems as they happen. We don't need perfect calculations if we can adjust on the fly. That sounds dangerous, a consortium advisor said. The elderly alien looked worried. It is dangerous, Jake admitted. But evacuation is also dangerous. People will die either way. At least this gives the planets a chance to survive. Vrel considered this. His tail began moving again. What would you need? Give us 48 hours, Helen said. We'll need to bring in more humans. Engineers, pilots, anyone with the right skills. We'll also need permission to modify some of your equipment. Modify our equipment? Quinn sounded alarmed. Our equipment is calibrated to exact specifications. We'll recalibrate it, Jake promised. Trust me, we know what we're doing. A Xanthari officer leaned close to Vrel and whispered something. Jake couldn't hear it, but he caught a few words. Madness, reckless, humans. Vrel was quiet for a long moment. His forearms unfolded. He looked at the display showing the growing anomaly. Then he looked at the evacuation plans. Finally, he looked at Jake and Helen. Human risk assessment is very different from coalition standards, Vrel said carefully. What you call acceptable risk, we call suicide missions. We've pulled off suicide missions before, Jake said with a small smile. I do not doubt that, Vrel replied. He made a decision. You have 48 hours, but I want detailed updates every 6 hours. And if your plan starts to fail, we will proceed with evacuation immediately. Fair enough, Helen said. I still think this is unwise, Quinn said. But she looked at her instruments again. However, I will admit that I want to see how humans approach this problem. It will be educational. Educational, Jake repeated. That's one word for it. The other scientists slowly left the room again. They talked quietly among themselves. Some looked hopeful. Others looked like they expected to witness a disaster. The Xanthari officer who had whispered to Vrel shook his head as he walked out. What did your officer say? Jake asked Vrel. The commander's tail moved in what might have been amusement. He said that allowing humans to attempt this borders on madness. What did you say? I told him that I learned something important during my time working with humans, Vrel answered. His yellow eyes seemed to glow slightly. Never bet against human stubbornness. You may not succeed, but you will certainly make the attempt interesting. Helen laughed. We'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one, Vrel assured her. Now what is your first step? Jake pulled out his communication device. We make some calls. We're going to need a lot of help. And coffee, Helen added. Lots and lots of coffee. Coffee? Quinn asked. It's a human thing, Jake explained. You'll understand soon enough. As Jake and Helen left the command center to begin organizing their team, Vrel watched them go. He hoped he had made the right decision. Humans were unpredictable. They broke rules. They took risks that made other species nervous. But they also had something special. They had confidence. When humans said they had something handled, they meant it. Vrel looked at the displays one more time. The anomaly pulsed and grew. 72 hours until collapse. 48 hours until he would know if human confidence was enough. He hoped it would be. Ships began arriving within 12 hours. Jake had called every human vessel within range, and they came. Military ships, civilian transports, mining vessels, even a small geological survey team. They all dropped what they were doing and rushed to help. Commander Vrel watched from the observation deck as ship after ship docked with the harmony of spheres. I did not expect so many to respond so quickly, he said to Jake. Humans help each other, Jake replied simply. When someone says they need help, we come running. The human crews gathered in the main cargo bay. It was a diverse group. There were military engineers in uniform standing next to miners in worn work clothes. Transport pilots talked with scientists. A woman with gray hair and calloused hands stood next to a young man who looked barely old enough to serve in the fleet. Helen stood on a platform where everyone could see her. She had charts and diagrams projected on the walls. Thank you all for coming, she began. I'm going to be honest with you. This is dangerous. We're going to do something that the coalition says is impossible. Sounds like Tuesday, someone called out. Several people laughed. Here's the situation, Helen continued. She explained the quantum anomaly, the 17 repair points, and the timing requirements. We'll be spread across 40,000 kilometers. We need to activate all 17 repair systems within microseconds of each other. If we're off by even a little bit, the whole thing fails. A tall man raised his hand. I'm Pete Collins, engineer. What equipment are we working with? Coalition standard repair systems, Helen answered. But we're going to modify them. That got everyone's attention. Quinn, who was observing from the side of the room, made a distressed chirping sound. Modify them? Those systems took years to develop. They are calibrated to exact specifications. And they're too slow for what we need, a woman named Amy Richardson said. She was one of the military engineers. We'll need to strip the safety limiters and boost the power output. That is extremely dangerous, Quinn protested. Yep, Amy agreed cheerfully. But it'll work. Carlos Mendoza, one of the mining engineers, studied the diagrams. What about communication delays? 40,000 kilometers is a long way. Even light-speed signals will have lag. We compensate in real time, Jake explained. Each team leader will have authority to make adjustments on the spot. We trust each other to do the right thing. A Zenthari officer who had come to observe spoke up. You are describing a plan with no central control. How will you maintain coordination? We talk to each other, Jake said. Constantly. We update, we adjust, we adapt. But without central authority, chaos will result. Organized chaos, Helen corrected. It's kind of our specialty. The human crews broke into teams. Pete took a group of engineers to modify the repair equipment. Amy led another team to prepare the ships that would carry them to the repair points. Carlos organized the miners who would handle the work in the asteroid fields where some of the repair points were located. Quinn followed Pete to the engineering bay. She wanted to see what humans meant by modification. What she saw horrified her. Pete and his team were taking apart perfectly good coalition equipment and changing it. You are welding two systems together that are not compatible, Quinn said, watching in dismay. They are now, Pete replied. He finished the weld and tested the connection. See? Works fine. For how long? Long enough, Pete said with a grin. Look, I know this isn't how you do things. You build stuff to last forever. But we need stuff that works right now. We can make it pretty later. In another section, Amy was reprogramming the safety systems on the repair equipment. A Mirari technician watched nervously as Amy disabled one safeguard after another. Those safety protocols exist for a reason, the Mirari said. I know, Amy replied, but they also slow everything down. We need speed more than we need safety right now. You could be killed. Amy looked up from her work. Maybe. But millions of people will definitely die if we don't try this. I'll take my chances. The human teams worked through the night. They communicated in rapid bursts of conversation that made the alien observers dizzy. Half-finished sentences somehow conveyed complete ideas. Technical jargon mixed with slang. Someone would start a thought and someone else would finish it. If we boost the power to 0.7, we can now. Our offset the delay, yeah, but we'll need to compensate on the back end. Got it. I'll adjust the calibration TAR, or 14.3 already on it. Commander Vrel watched all of this with growing anxiety. The humans worked without detailed written plans. They made decisions quickly, often with just a glance or a nod. They trusted each other completely. It was so different from how the coalition operated. How do they know what each other is thinking? Vrel asked Jake during one of the update meetings. We don't always, Jake admitted, but we know each other's skills. We trust each other's judgment. When Pete makes a modification, I know it'll work because Pete knows what he's doing. When Amy disables a safety system, I know she's calculated the risks. And if you are wrong, Jake shrugged, then we adapt. That's the other thing about humans. We're really good at fixing problems on the fly. During a break, several of the human crew gathered in the mess hall. They were eating, laughing, and telling stories. Quinn joined them, curious about human behavior under stress. Does the danger not frighten you? She asked. Carlos took a drink of his coffee. Sure, it's scary. But fear doesn't help, so we don't focus on it. Instead, you laugh. Laughter helps, a young pilot named Danny Shaw said. Keeps the mood light. If we sit around worrying, we'll just make ourselves nervous. Your species is very strange, Quinn observed. We get that a lot, Amy said with a smile. By the 36-hour mark, everything was ready. The 17 ships were equipped and prepared. The crews had been assigned to their positions. The modified repair systems had been tested as much as possible in the time available. Helen gave a final briefing. Each team leader received their assignments and their backup plans. Well, Helen called them backup plans. In reality, they were rough ideas about what to do if things went wrong. Remember, Helen said, we're all connected. Keep talking to each other. If something goes wrong at your position, tell everyone immediately. Someone will figure out a solution. What if the solution doesn't work? Someone asked. Then we try something else, Jake said. We keep trying until either we succeed or we run out of time. The crews began moving to their ships. There were handshakes and hugs. People wished each other good luck. Some of the goodbyes looked final, like people who knew they might not see each other again. Commander Vrel stood with Jake and Helen as they watched the crews depart. I have reviewed your plans, Vrel said quietly. There are at least 47 points where things could go catastrophically wrong. Probably more like 50, Jake said. And yet you proceed anyway. We have to, Helen said. Those people on the 3 planets are counting on us. They don't even know they're in danger. We can't let them down. Vrel's tail moved slowly. I am beginning to understand why other species find humans so disturbing. You proceed with confidence even when logic says you should fail. Maybe logic isn't everything, Jake suggested. That is a very human thing to say. Vrel replied. I hope you are correct. The last ship departed. 17 vessels moved into position around the quantum anomaly. Each one carried a human crew ready to do the impossible, or, as they kept insisting, the improbable. Jake and Helen returned to the command center. Screens showed all 17 positions. Communication channels linked everyone together. The countdown had begun. They had 12 hours until the operation started. 12 hours to do final checks, final preparations, and final worries. Helen looked at all the screens. We're really doing this. Yep, Jake agreed. We're either going to be heroes or cautionary tales. Why not both? Jake said with a grin. In the background, Quinn checked her calculations one more time. The probability of success had actually gone down slightly with all the human modifications. It was now less than 3%. She decided not to mention this to Commander Vrel. Some things were better left unsaid. The operation began exactly as planned. For 7 minutes, everything worked perfectly. All 17 teams reported ready status. The equipment functioned properly. The timing was precise. Then reality hit them like a hammer. Anomaly fluctuation exceeding predictions, Quinn announced from the harmony of spheres. Her voice stayed calm, but her feathers were standing straight up. Quantum variance is 40% higher than calculated. Team 3 were seeing power spikes, Carlos reported from his position near an asteroid field. The equipment is handling it, but barely. Copy that, Jake responded. He was watching 17 different screens at once, each showing data from a different repair point. All teams be ready to adjust power levels on the fly. Helen sat next to him, her fingers moving across multiple tablets. She was monitoring energy readings, spatial distortions, and timing sequences all at the same time. Numbers scrolled past faster than most people could read, but Helen processed them instantly. Team 7 reduced power by 3%, Helen called out. Team 12 increased by 5%. We need to balance the load. The teams responded immediately. No questions, no hesitation. They trusted Helen's calculations. At position 5, Amy Richardson watched her platform start to shake. The metal structure was anchored to a piece of debris floating in space, but the debris was breaking apart. Cracks appeared in the surface. Position 5, I've got structural problems, Amy reported. She kept working on the repair equipment even as the platform trembled beneath her feet. Platform is losing integrity. Can you complete the sequence? Jake asked. Amy looked at her instruments. Maybe. If this thing holds together for another 8 minutes. Pilot Shaw, what's your status? Jake called. I'm 2 clicks away from position 5, Danny Shaw answered. He was piloting a small transport ship. I can get there in 90 seconds. Do it, Jake ordered. Amy, be ready to continue working from Danny's ship if the platform fails. Understood, Amy said. She didn't sound worried. She sounded focused. At position 14, Pete Collins ran into a different problem. His communication system suddenly went dead. No transmissions in or out. He was alone in the dark with a partially completed repair and no way to coordinate with the other teams. On the harmony of spheres, Jake saw position 14's signal disappear. Pete, do you copy? Nothing. Pete, respond. Still nothing. He has lost communications, Quinn said. Without coordination, he cannot time his activation correctly. The entire operation will fail. Pete's smart, Helen said. She was already running calculations. He'll keep working based on the last timing data he received. We compensate for his position by adjusting teams 13 and 15. You are guessing what he will do, Quinn protested. Educated guessing, Helen corrected. I know, Pete. He won't stop working just because he can't talk to us. At position 14, Pete was doing exactly what Helen predicted. He had noted the timing sequence before his communications died. He checked his chronometer and kept working. If he couldn't coordinate with the others, he would have to trust that they would compensate for him. That's what teams did. Carlos faced his own crisis at position 3. The asteroid his team was working on started to rotate unexpectedly. The anomaly's energy was affecting the rock's stability. His team had minutes before the rotation would tear apart their equipment. Forget Plan A, Carlos said to his crew. We're going with Plan F. We don't have a Plan F, one of his engineers said. We do now, Carlos replied. I'm making it up as we go. Get the secondary equipment ready. We'll mount it on the other side of the asteroid and work from there. That's not going to give us enough time. Then we work faster. Commander Vrel watched all of this from the command center. His forearms gripped the edges of his console. This was chaos, pure chaos. Teams were improvising, equipment was failing, and the humans just kept working like nothing was wrong. They are going to die, a Zenthari officer whispered. Perhaps, Vrel replied. Or perhaps we are witnessing something remarkable. At position 5, Amy's platform finally gave up. The metal structure collapsed just as Danny Shaw's ship arrived. Amy jumped. For a terrifying moment, she floated in space with nothing but her suit between her and the void. Then Danny's ship caught her in its docking clamp. Got you, Danny said. Thanks for the ride, Amy replied. She pulled herself into the ship's airlock. Get me to the equipment. I've got 6 minutes to finish the calibration. 6 minutes? That's half the time you need. Then I'd better work twice as fast. Helen saw Amy's biometrics spike on her screen. Adrenaline was flooding Amy's system, but her hands were steady. Amy connected to the repair equipment from inside Danny's ship and continued working. Position 9 ran into trouble when a spatial eddy appeared out of nowhere. The pilot had to move the ship 300 meters to avoid being pulled into the distortion. That put the repair equipment out of range. Position 9, report, Jake called. We moved to avoid the eddy, the team leader reported. Trying to get back in range, but the eddy is growing. Can you work around it? Negative. We need to go through it. Jake and Helen exchanged glances. Going through a spatial eddy was incredibly dangerous. The ship could be torn apart. But without Position 9, the whole operation would fail. Your call, Jake said to the team leader. There was a pause. Then the team leader spoke. We're going through. If we don't make it, adjust for our position. Good luck, Jake said quietly. The ship plunged into the spatial eddy. For 30 seconds, no one could reach them. Their signal vanished. Everyone in the command center held their breath. Then the ship emerged on the other side. Damaged but functional. We're through, the team leader reported. His voice was shaking slightly. Equipment is still operational. Continuing sequence. Medical Officer Kevin Brooks moved between ships, treating injuries as they happened. At Position 8, an engineer had been burned by plasma discharge. Kevin worked on the injury while the engineer continued calibrating equipment with his other hand. You should rest, Kevin said. We can rest when we're done, the engineer replied through gritted teeth. At Position 17, Rachel Turner spotted a cascade failure developing in the power systems. It was subtle, something the automated systems hadn't caught. If it continued, 3 different repair points would lose power simultaneously. Jake, we've got a cascade starting, Rachel called out. I'm rerouting power through the backup systems. Those systems aren't rated for that kind of load, Quinn warned. They are now, Rachel said. Her hands flew across the controls. She pushed systems beyond their limits, creating solutions from insufficient resources. The aliens watching from the harmony of spheres couldn't believe what they were seeing. Humans were solving problems faster than the problems could develop. When one approach failed, they immediately tried another. They compensated for each other without needing detailed instructions. They worked through injuries and fear and equipment failures. How are they doing this? A consortium observer asked quietly. They thrive in chaos, Commander Vrel answered. He was beginning to understand. Other species see disaster and freeze. Humans see disaster and accelerate. With 2 minutes remaining, Pete's communication suddenly came back online. His voice crackled through the speakers. Position 14 to command. Sorry about the radio silence. I'm on schedule and ready for final activation. Good to hear your voice, Pete, Jake said. Relief was clear in his tone. Did you really think I'd miss the big finish? Pete replied. Helen looked at her countdown timer. 90 seconds. All 17 positions were barely holding together, but they were holding. Equipment was failing, people were injured, and everything was held together with hope and determination. All teams' final countdown, Helen announced. 60 seconds to simultaneous activation. The seconds ticked down. 30, 20, 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Activate now. 17 teams spread across 40,000 kilometers pressed their activation buttons in perfect synchronization. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the quantum anomaly exploded with light. The screens in the command center went white. Alarms blared. Then slowly the light faded. Everyone waited to see if they had succeeded or failed. The quantum anomaly pulsed once, twice, then stabilized. The violent energy that had been tearing space apart suddenly calmed. On every instrument across 17 positions, the readings showed the same thing. Success. It worked, Quinn whispered. She stared at her screens in disbelief. It actually worked. The command center erupted in cheers. Human voices mixed with alien celebration as the reality sank in. They had done it. The impossible, improbable task was complete. 3 planets and 4.3 million people were safe. Jake leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. His hands were shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. Next to him, Helen put her head down on her console. Neither of them spoke for a moment. They didn't need to. All teams report status, Jake finally said into the communication system. The reports came in one by one. Every team had survived, though not without cost. Position 5's platform had been completely destroyed. Position 9's ship needed major repairs. Position 14 had lost its entire communications array. Multiple people had injuries ranging from minor burns to broken bones, but everyone was alive. 6 hours later, the human crews gathered in the Harmony of Spheres medical bay. The alien medical staff moved between patients, treating injuries that should have been much worse. Humans healed faster than most species, but even so, some of these injuries would take weeks to fully recover. Carlos sat on a medical bed, showing off the plasma burns on his arms to Amy. "Check these out. I look like I wrestled a star." "That's nothing," Amy replied. She pointed to a long scar on her leg where falling debris had cut through her suit. "I've got a souvenir that'll last forever." Pete walked over on crutches. He had twisted his ankle when his ship had been shaken by the anomaly's final pulse. "Are we really comparing injuries?" "Because I think the guy at position 9 wins. He went through a spatial eddy." The team leader from position 9, a man named Tyler Grant, laughed from across the room. "I'm never doing that again. Once through an eddy is enough for a lifetime." A Maori medical technician watched this exchange with confusion. "Why are you laughing? You nearly died." "Multiple times." "Yeah, but we didn't," Carlos said cheerfully. "That's worth celebrating. Your species processes trauma very strangely. We process it later," Amy explained. "Right now we celebrate the win. The trauma can wait." Commander Vrel had requested a private meeting with Jake and Helen in his quarters. When they arrived, they found the Zenthari commander standing by a large window that looked out at the now stable anomaly. It shimmered peacefully, no longer a threat. "You saved 4.3 million lives today," Vrel said without turning around. "They will never know how close they came to losing their worlds." "That's fine," Jake replied. "We didn't do it for recognition." "Why did you do it?" Vrel turned to face them. His yellow eyes were intense. "I need to understand. You risked everything on a plan that should not have worked. How did you know it would succeed?" Helen sat down in one of the chairs. She looked tired but satisfied. "We didn't know. Not for certain. We made our best assessment of the risks and decided they were worth taking. But the probability of failure was over 90%. "Probability isn't destiny," Jake said. "It's just math. Math doesn't account for human determination." Vrel sat down across from them. He was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. "I want to tell you something that I have never told a human before. It may help you understand why what you did today was so remarkable." Jake and Helen waited. "Most coalition species evolved on stable worlds," Vrel began. "My people, the Zenthari, developed on a planet with predictable weather, stable geology, and moderate climate. We learned to survive through careful planning and logical thinking. The same is true for the Palaxians, the Maori, and most others. We faced challenges, certainly, but our worlds taught us that patience and precision lead to success." "Earth is different," Helen said quietly. "Very different," Vrel agreed. "I have studied your world. Earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis, volcanoes. Your planet tries to kill you constantly. Your weather is chaotic. Your geology is unstable. Even your biology is dangerous. And yet humans not only survived, you thrived. You learned to adapt to chaos because you had no other choice." "It's why we're good at improvising," Jake said. "It is more than that," Vrel continued. "What I witnessed today was not just improvisation. It was confidence born from thousands of years of achieving the unlikely. You say we've got this because you have proven again and again that you can handle whatever the universe throws at you. That confidence is unsettling to other species. But it is also inspiring. There was a knock at the door. Science Officer Quinn entered carrying a tablet. Her feathers were smoothed down now, a sign she had calmed from the earlier stress. I have completed my analysis of the operation, Quinn announced. She showed them the tablet. I tracked every decision made by the human teams during the crisis. There were 17 moments where teams deviated from the optimal calculated solution. And, Helen asked, and in all 17 cases the human decisions produced better outcomes than the calculated optimal solutions. Quinn's beak clicked in a gesture that meant confusion. I cannot explain it mathematically. Your teams made choices that should not have worked better, but they did. Intuition, Jake suggested. That is not a scientific term. No, but it's real, Helen said. Humans process complex variables subconsciously. We can't always explain why we make certain choices, but those choices are based on pattern recognition and experience. It's not magic. It's just a different kind of intelligence. Quinn sat down, still studying her tablet. I am recommending that the Coalition study human decision-making processes further. We may be able to learn from your methods. We'd be happy to teach, Jake said. Later that evening, Elder Counselor Moran arrived from Coalition Central Authority. The ancient counselor moved slowly on her 4 legs, her turtle-like shell marked with symbols of her rank and age. She had been alive for 300 years and had seen much. She met with Jake and Helen in the observation deck. The 3 planets they had saved were visible in the distance, blue and green and beautiful. The Coalition has always known that humanity was different, Moran said in her slow, deep voice. We welcomed you as members, but we did not truly understand what your presence would mean. And now? Helen asked. Now we begin to see, Moran replied. You are teaching us that there are different kinds of wisdom. We have logic, precision, and patience. You have adaptability, confidence, and courage. Neither is better than the other, but together, they could be powerful. That sounds like the beginning of something good, Jake said. Perhaps, Moran agreed, or perhaps the beginning of something challenging. Change is difficult even when it is necessary, but today you proved that your way has value. The Council will not forget this. After Moran left, Jake and Helen stood alone at the observation window. They watched the stars and the peaceful anomaly and the 3 saved planets. We should write a report, Helen said. Jake laughed. Who would believe it? 17 teams, barely any plan, everything going wrong, and somehow we pulled it off. That's going to be the shortest report ever. It worked. Don't ask how. I like it. Simple and accurate. They stood together in comfortable silence. Tomorrow there would be meetings and debriefings and formal reports. The crews would go back to their ships. Life would return to normal. But tonight, they could just enjoy the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. On one of the saved planets below, a family sat down to dinner, completely unaware that their world had almost ended. They laughed and ate and planned for tomorrow, secure in the belief that tomorrow would come. It would, thanks to humans who said they had it covered and then proved it. 3 months later, Unity's Gate space station orbited peacefully at the edge of Coalition space. The massive station served as a training facility for the entire Galactic Coalition. Today it was hosting something new, a class taught by humans. Lieutenant Commander Jake Murphy stood in front of a classroom filled with alien students. There were Xanthari, Palaxians, Morauri, and a dozen other species. They all watched him with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. Welcome to Adaptive Crisis Response, Jake said. This course is going to teach you how to solve problems when your perfect plan falls apart. A Xanthari engineer raised one of his 4 arms. But if we plan correctly, plans should not fall apart. In a perfect universe, sure, Jake replied. But the universe isn't perfect. Equipment fails. Situations change. Information turns out to be wrong. When that happens, you need to adapt. Adaptation implies improvisation, a Palaxian student said. Improvisation implies lack of proper preparation. No, improvisation means being prepared for anything, even things you didn't expect. Jake pulled up a hologram showing the quantum anomaly crisis. Let me give you an example. Over the next hour, Jake walked them through the operation. He showed them all the things that went wrong and how the human teams adapted. The alien students took notes, but they still looked uncertain. How did you know which adaptations would work? The Xanthari engineer asked. We didn't, Jake admitted. We made our best guesses based on experience and training. Sometimes you have to trust your gut. Your digestive system? The Xanthari looked confused. It's an expression. It means trusting your instincts. In another part of the station, Dr. Helen Carter worked with a group of coalition scientists. They were developing new mathematical models that incorporated human decision-making patterns. It was challenging work. Human intuition didn't fit easily into equations. Science Officer Quinn had become Helen's primary collaborator. The Palaxian scientist was fascinated by the problem. How do you quantify instinct? Quinn asked. How do you measure confidence? You don't, Helen replied. That's what makes it difficult. Human decision-making involves unconscious pattern recognition. We process information we don't even realize we're seeing. But there must be rules, parameters. There are, but they're flexible. That's the point. Helen showed Quinn some data. Look at this. During the anomaly crisis, teams made split-second decisions that deviated from optimal calculations. But they had better outcomes because they accounted for variables that our conscious minds hadn't processed yet. A consortium scientist spoke up. You are describing a system that cannot be taught. It can be taught, Helen corrected. It just can't be taught the way you're used to learning. You have to practice making decisions under pressure. You have to learn to trust yourself. That was the hard part. Most coalition species didn't trust themselves to make decisions without complete information. They wanted calculations, projections, and certainty. Humans had learned to act without certainty. Captain Greg Palmer was running practical training exercises with the first mixed species rapid response team. The team included 3 humans, 2 Xanthari, 2 Palaxians, and a Mirari. They were working on a simulated crisis that required quick thinking. Okay, situation, Greg called out. You're repairing a damaged reactor. Suddenly, the containment field starts failing. You have 30 seconds before breach. What do you do? The Xanthari immediately started calculating optimal solutions. The Palaxians pulled up technical manuals. The humans looked at the available equipment and started improvising. We don't have time for calculations, one of the human engineers, Sophie Lynn, said. We need to act now. But without proper calculations, we might make the situation worse, Xanthari protested. Or we might save everyone's lives, Sophie replied. She grabbed some equipment and started assembling a temporary containment field. Help me. We can make this work. The Xanthari hesitated, then joined her. Together, the human and the alien worked to create a solution. The Palaxians provided quick calculations to guide their work. The Mirari used her spatial awareness to position equipment precisely. They stopped the breach with 3 seconds to spare. See, Greg said after the simulation ended. That's how it's supposed to work. Everyone contributes their strengths. Humans provide quick thinking and adaptability. Xanthari provide logic and precision. Palaxians provide calculations. Mirari provide spatial awareness. Together, you're stronger than any single species. The teams ran through drill after drill. Slowly, the alien crew members began to understand. They learned to make decisions without complete information. They learned to trust their human teammates' instincts. They learned that sometimes good enough right now was better than perfect too late. Commander Vrel was at Unity's Gate 2, presenting his findings to the Coalition Council via long-range transmission. His report was causing quite a stir. The quantum anomaly crisis proved something important, Vrel told the assembled counselors. The Coalition has become too cautious. We rely on certainty, but certainty is not always possible. Humanity has shown us another way. You are suggesting we abandon our careful methods? One counselor asked. No, Vrel replied. I am suggesting we add human methods to our own. We should combine alien precision with human adaptability. We should learn to act decisively when perfection is impossible. There was resistance, of course. Some counselors argued that human methods were too risky, that encouraging improvisation would lead to disasters, that the Coalition's careful approach had served them well for centuries. Ambassador Thel stood to speak. The crystalline diplomat projected images into the council chamber. I have analyzed 17 previous Coalition crises where evacuation was the chosen response. Using simulations based on human operational methods, I calculate that 3 of those situations could have been resolved without evacuation. We did not fail in those situations, but we did not succeed either. We chose safety over action. And you believe action would have been better? a counselor challenged. I believe we should have the option of action, Thel replied. Human methods are not appropriate for every situation, but neither is evacuation. We need flexibility. The debate continued for hours. In the end, the vote was close, but the proposal passed. The coalition would officially integrate human training methods into emergency response protocols. New mixed species teams would be formed. Human instructors would teach throughout coalition space. It was a small change, but it was a beginning. That evening, the original team from the Anomaly Crisis gathered at Unity's gate for a celebration. Jake, Helen, Pete, Amy, Carlos, and the others were joined by Commander Vrel, Quinn, and other alien friends who had become like family. Carlos raised his glass. To achieving the impossible. The improbable, Amy corrected with a grin. The impossible is scheduled for next Tuesday. Everyone laughed, even the aliens who were still learning human humor. Commander Vrel stood up. His yellow eyes were warm as he looked at his human friends. I have a question for you, Lieutenant Commander Murphy. What will you tackle next? What challenge will humanity face? Jake smiled. He looked around at his team, at the aliens who had learned to work alongside humans, at the station where species from across the galaxy were learning to blend their strengths. Whatever comes our way, Jake said confidently. Broken reactors, spatial anomalies, impossible rescues. It doesn't matter what the challenge is. Because? Vrel prompted, though he already knew the answer. Because we've got this, Jake replied. The room erupted in agreement, human voices mixed with alien sounds of approval. It was more than just words now. It was a philosophy. A promise. A way of facing the universe with confidence and courage. On screens throughout Unity's gate, a new motto appeared in multiple languages and scripts. It would become the unofficial slogan of every mixed species rapid response team in the coalition. When perfection is impossible, excellence is enough. We've got this. Outside the station, ships came and went. Some carried supplies. Others carried new students eager to learn. Still others carried mixed species crews heading out to face whatever challenges the galaxy held. The coalition was changing. Slowly, carefully, but definitely changing. Humanity had brought more than technology and ships when they joined the galactic community. They had brought something intangible but powerful. The confidence to face impossible situations and the determination to succeed anyway. 3 planets in the verdant sector continued their peaceful orbits, their inhabitants still unaware of how close they had come to disaster. Across the galaxy, millions of people lived and worked and played, protected by crews who now combined alien wisdom with human courage. And somewhere out in the vast darkness of space, the next crisis was already forming. Equipment would fail. Disasters would strike. Impossible situations would arise, but now, the coalition had learned something valuable. When humans said they had something covered, they meant it. And when humans and aliens worked together, combining their different strengths and perspectives, there wasn't much they couldn't handle. The future was uncertain. It always was. But it was also full of possibility. And that was exactly how humans liked it.